Also on the psychology committee, where we're creating new courses for business students. And my focus and passion is positive psychology. And what I want to share with you today is some learnings from University of Pennsylvania's Master of Applied Positive Psychology program. I'm actually applying to go to their program this fall. They only accept about 38 people in the world, so I'm crossing my fingers I get in. I made it past my second interview, so it's sort of interesting to be an instructor and a student at the same time. So let's begin and talk about how we can survive and thrive in times of uncertainty. So here's our agenda today, and if everyone could mute their mics, I'm just going to mute Kathleen. There we go. We're going to have a little giggle for everyone to enjoy that. We're going to do a little check-in with some local gossip or news. So feel free to share with us a story of what's happening to you locally, because this is a global class. Then we're going to talk about post-traumatic growth, how to actually grow through trauma. And then for college students, which is the majority of the participants in the class today, how to go from anxiety feelings to thriving during your time in college. So let's start with a little giggle.
Because of coronavirus, you are going to be quarantined, but you have a choice. Do you A, quarantine with your wife and child, or B?
B.
So I think a lot of people are feeling that way. So feel free to raise your hand and share with us any gossip or news that's happening in your local area. This is sort of like a global local news about what's happening with coronavirus in your area. One thing I did find interesting is if anyone is tuning in from Bermuda, if you run a non-essential business and you get caught, one of my students told me that you get arrested for attempted murder. So I thought that was an interesting little tidbit. And Charles is in Brazil. Charles, could you open up your mic and let us know what it's like in Brazil?
Well, so far right now, each state has different laws, but they are asking like everyone that goes out to wear masks. The business were closed for a couple of while. Now they are starting to open again. However, we didn't have tests, so we don't know how this will play out. The good news is that Brazil is a warm country, and the predictions is not going as expected by the OCDE and other international organizations. So I don't know if it's our weather or people's immune systems, but I think we are in good shape compared to other countries.
Oh, so the numbers aren't as bad there, and they're thinking perhaps it's because of the warm climate?
Yeah.
Okay. One thing I read the other day in Boston, we have a very large homeless facility called the Pine Street Inn, and they tested 500 residents. These are all homeless people. Over 50% tested positive, but they're asymptomatic. And they're actually looking at that as potentially good news, that there's actually more people surviving the virus and they're not even showing symptoms. So they actually were taking that as a piece of good news. It is disturbing that people are testing positive and they have no symptoms, but it's definitely early days to be making conclusions. And Kathleen is in New Hampshire. I'm just going to unmute your mic, Kathleen. What's it like in New Hampshire for you?
Well, it is interesting what you say about asymptomatic. That I think 30% of the population that, people that they've tested and or test, they do show asymptomatic, and that seems to be a trend that's going on. And I did join that app for MIT that they have, How I Feel app, and it shows in your zip code how many people are feeling well that joined the app and how many are feeling bad. And there were 1,300 people that were feeling well and 388 that were feeling badly. And they're asking specifically for symptoms of the coronavirus. And
this is the MIT How Do I Feel app?
Yes. So if you go and you join that, and it will prompt you every day and ask you, I can send you the link, but it's How I Feel app, the MIT app. And so you join it and you answer the questions every day. So they're using that to try to get kind of an idea of how this may go for people.
Interesting.
And they ask
Thank you. I did put into the chat MIT How Do I Feel app, so feel free to Google it. Kathleen, if you want to put that link into the chat,
I can try to. All right, and if I can't, I'll email it because I'm not as technical, but I'll go get. And one other note I want to tell you guys, it's kind of a cute story. So I've been self-quarantining, but I do curbside pickup just to be extra cautious. And the other day I went by the firehouse in Derry, which is a town near me, and there was a guy in a full Spider-Man suit with the whole mask, the whole thing over his face, walking around. I just thought that was hilarious. That was his way of quarantining.
There's a lot of weird going on. I see there's a lot of individuality being expressed on the streets. Thank you, Kathleen. And
You're welcome.
Nylan, I see your hand is up. Welcome. How's it going for you?
It's going fine for me. You know, I'm in Boston. However, San Francisco was my former neighborhood, and I read in the San Francisco Chronicle this morning that based on autopsies, they found that, you know, that two people who had died in the first week of February actually had passed away due to coronavirus, which pushed up the date because they would have had to have contracted it sometime in January, much earlier than the CDC had initially reported the first cases in the United States appearing, which was in Seattle in March. So it's been around longer than it was thought.
Interesting. I've been hearing the same thing about people in California, that some people last year had coronavirus-like symptoms that were just considered to be the flu, and now they're sort of wondering, was it actually coronavirus? It's kind of hard to tell, but
Right.
yeah, it's sort of interesting that how much we don't know, and then as it just sort of evolves over time. Thank you for that. Okay, let's dig into it. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is what's called benefit finding and benefit reminding. So this is some work that has been done for coping strategies. I'm teaching a human resources class this semester on the Boston campus, and I put this into the HR manager toolkit that sometimes you could have a direct report or someone that's part of your organization that has gone through a traumatic event, and you may be the first person that they interact with. And granted, most of us are not licensed therapists, and that's not our role or our job, but we want to be helpful without causing harm. And here's some tips on how to handle people who have actually gone through a traumatic crisis. So let's take a look at some of the data that you'll see. Normal life, the horizontal line, this is just everything is fine. And then there comes a traumatic event. And this is where normal life goes underwater, and now you're not nearly as good as what you used to be. Now, there's actually 4 trajectories that you can go from this point. Now, the worst case scenario would be succumbing to the post-traumatic stress disorder or the traumatic event, and you just stay there. So you actually never recover, which means you would be constantly depressed. You would never go back to work. Whatever negative events happen to you, those would continue to happen because you don't recover. One step above that would be survival with impairment, where you do survive the event, but you have some form of impairment that is going to be noticeable. And one way to take a look at this as an example would be people that are using service animals. Perhaps they had a traumatic event, but let's say, for example, someone was in an airplane crash. They don't want to get back on an airplane again. The only way that they can get back on is, let's say, with Valium to calm them down, and maybe a service animal to keep them calm. So they're still surviving, they're still able to fly, but there's an impairment there, and they're going to need either medicine or a service animal or something else that's going to help them get through. If you get back to baseline, that's what we call recovery through resilience. And this is literally just simply bouncing back, where you go back to wherever you were before the traumatic event and you simply move on. So let's say something really bad happened. Like, for example, 08 was really bad financially for a lot of people, myself included, but I came back. It took about 10 years, but I made it back. And so I'm resilient with that. So that's just called recovery. But what we're interested in looking at through positive psychology is what's called PTG, post-traumatic growth, where you could actually thrive because of a traumatic event, meaning had the traumatic event not occurred, for example, had coronavirus not occurred, this thriving growth opportunity would not have presented itself. So what I'm going to encourage you to think about is what good things have happened because coronavirus has come into our lives. So I'm going to ask you to think about, and we're going to be going into breakout groups in just a minute. So I'm going to make sure that everyone knows how to open up their mic. Think about what benefits have you found during coronavirus. Now I'll share with you one. I used to photograph a lot when I was in my early 20s. And as I got older, I kind of let that go to the wayside. But now this is a photograph I took at a lake that's near my home. And I have an iPhone 11 and it has a great camera on it. So now I'm photographing again. And had I not had coronavirus come into my life, I wouldn't have started photographing again. But here's a couple other things that have come. If it weren't for coronavirus, I would have never adopted a cat. So I adopted a cat who looks like a leopard. And so his name is Leo, and his full name is Leo Quarantine, so that I can always remember when I got him. And also, I'm not a very good painter, but I'm pretty good with paint by numbers. So now what I'm doing is getting paint by numbers with Monet's. So now I'm actually becoming a paint forger, which is a lot of fun. It takes forever. And then also I like to garden, but I'm not good at it and I'm lazy. So now I'm a bonsai farmer. So about once a month I come and I clip a leaf off of this thing. And it's actually kind of nice and relaxing. And I'm also cooking at home and I'm just putting weird sauces together with random foods because I'm bored. I just want to do something new. And I wanted to share with you that scallops and honey mustard is really tasty. So these are some things that I would have never benefited from had coronavirus never come along. So what we're going to do now is that we're going to go into breakout groups of 3 or more, and I'm going to ask you to share with your groups the benefits that you've had because of coronavirus. What good things have happened? And when we come back, we're going to write those benefits into the chat. So let me just start out our breakout groups. 1 second. And when you get the invitation, just say yes to it. Actually, Alex is the host, which is not allowing me to do breakout groups. But since there's only 11 people in the room, we're going to go through each person that's in the room and just share with us 1 or 2 benefits that you've noticed. Can we start with Charles and then we'll go to Nyland? And then after that, we'll go to Aunt Patty. Charles, would you like to start?
Yes, it has been like a while that I hasn't been with my family, and right now I'm with my family for around a month and 10 days, more or less. And I started playing keyboard again. That is great. It's helping me to relieve some of the stress, and it's just a good time learning a new, not that really new, but just relearning what I learned when I was a child.
Oh, great. So had it not been for coronavirus, you wouldn't have reunited with your keyboard and your family as much. That's excellent. Thank you.
Welcome.
Nyland.
Well, I've discovered the joys of Zoom. For example, yesterday, I participated in a 2-hour-long 70th birthday party for a friend that had 36 guests from 4 different countries, about 11 different states. It was wonderful, and that would have never happened had there not been Zoom. I Zoom with my kids like every other day, and we never did that before. Even within the context of teaching, I have a student in Sicily, somebody in Phnom Penh, and somebody in Bermuda, and sharing those experiences from on the ground where they are has really been enriching to the entire experience. So I'm delighted with Zoom.
Oh, excellent. So Zoom parties, love it. Thank you, Nyland. And my Aunt Patty's on the line in New Jersey. Aunt Patty and Uncle Tony, welcome to class. What benefits have you found during coronavirus?
Well, Mike, can you hear me first of all?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, one of the things that I've been doing each day, I really try to do something constructive, and I've had lots of fun doing it. For example, one of the things was cleaning out my attic, which was a long overdue to-do list. In doing so, I came across some interesting photos also came across some interesting emails that I had received in the past. And what I did was I actually sat down, found some stationery, my good old Hallmark stationery box, and I wrote letters to my friends. And what I did was all of the photos that I had found while cleaning out that included them, I sent them a nice little note as well as the photo. And I found that to be very rewarding. It's just been years since I actually sat down and wrote a note to someone. One of
Excellent.
the
Yeah,
other
a lot of people love handwritten notes. They're so rare.
Yes, yes, exactly. So it was really nice for me to do it, and I think the friends that received them were happy to receive them as well. The other thing I have found to be something that you did as well, Mike, and that is cooking. Sometimes you have some limitations, and it's so easy just to take a hop, skip, and a jump over to the grocery store, pick up the ingredient. But now you can't do that. So I found some pretty interesting recipes that I've used because I've had to create some new ingredients, and we really had a good time with it. We had some pretty good meals as a result, right, Tony?
Right,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Excellent. That's fun. And Uncle Tony, what benefits have you found during this time?
Well, basically, I've gotten back into doing more crossword puzzles, if that's something that's pertinent. Have rediscovered that I actually have a fairly good vocabulary, but it's not so much the vocabulary part of it that I find interesting. It's um, being able to use my brain, kind of sitting around and having my brain function instead of just going through the daily ritual of I sold my business 4 years ago, so that was kind of an everyday thing. But now I've found that I really enjoy using the gray matter that sits between my two ears a little bit more, and that's been rewarding to me. Um, I've solved riddles in some of these puzzles. Some of the puzzles are more difficult than others. The ones from the latter part of the week from the Los Angeles Times seem to be the more difficult ones. Um, but I enjoy just using my mental capacities to gain a bit of satisfaction when I complete one of these puzzles. So that's one of the things. There are other things. Um, I've become more active in following my 401k, which obviously these days is not such great news most of the time. But
The
I've
201k?
worked. Yeah, it's been a 201k more than a 401, and I've found some enjoyment in doing that. I've figured out a couple of little formulas as to when the market goes up and when it goes down, and what should when a bear market is likely to follow a bull market. And I've worked out some formulas as to how my particular investment company that I work with, how they have functioned by comparison to the Dow. And it's kind of interesting. There seems to be a common thread that runs through it, where I can tell that if the market increases by X number of dollars, what is the multiple of what my 401k benefits? So many dollars to one, so to speak. How many dollars am I gaining when the market gains X number of dollars, and vice versa when the market goes down. So a couple of interesting things. Again, just using my mind in different ways. So that's pretty much it.
Excellent. Thank you. And Glady, I see you're with us. Glady, would you like to share with us?
Hello, everyone. How are
Hi.
you? Well, one of the benefits that I have found because of coronavirus is that before I wanted to read as much as I was reading before when I was in high school. And for some reason, maybe because of I was more busy, I stopped. So like now I'm reading more books, and I have taken up writing, something that I really really like. So like I found myself like maybe like if I'm in like a classroom or just talking to some friends, and some like topic pops up in my head, I'm writing the topic, and the next thing is that I'm doing like research on the topic and writing stuff about it. It's something that I have personal, that is personal, that I don't like have shown to anybody, but that is something that I've been doing since the coronavirus, and it's something that I found very rewarding, and that possibly like maybe like the next 6 months maybe like take up to online platform.
Oh,
Yeah.
beautiful. Thank you, Glidey. Good to have you in the
Yeah.
room today. Kathleen, and then we'll go to Luis. Kathleen, what benefits have you found? You're
All
unmuted.
right. So, well, as you know, I'm somebody that never stays home. So this has been a little bit of a challenge in that way. So I've been spending a lot more time at home, but, and I've been very safe. And one of the things that I started to do is cooking, a lot of cooking, because I used to do a lot of cooking. So I've made up some recipes and discovered I can still do that. And then also I do a lot of walks around the lake, but I find that I have to take different angles because sometimes there is not social distancing going on near where I live. So you have to be careful, which is very sad. But, and then the other thing is I've been writing, of course, but now recently I just signed up for an online course to teach English with Teflex. I think that's how you pronounce it. So that's going to be an 11-week course that I'll be doing. So I'm excited about that because it gives me something that I can kind of grab a hold of besides the writing, because that comes sporadic for me. And the other thing is my son and I have been Skyping a lot together. And now it's like, if I don't call him, he calls me. So that's something that wasn't really happening in the past because he's in Rhode Island quarantined. And then I'm spending some time with my cat, who's not doing too well right now. She's got kidney problems. So she's got kidney failure going on. So I've been trying to like encourage her. I just got a bird feeder. I picked it up curbside to put a bird feeder on the window to kind of say, hey, you know, you got to stick around so you can see these birds.
Right.
So that's the type of stuff that I've been working on. And sewing, I've been working on masks, but I don't have elastic yet. I've been waiting for elastic to come. And then I've tried to crochet, but I still suck at that. I'm just not good at it, but it's going to be a cat blanket. So.
Nice. Okay. Thank you, Kathleen. Luis, would you like to share with us what benefits you have found during coronavirus? Let me just unmute for you. Yeah, it's not unmuting. Jafeng, would you like to go next? Would you like to unmute?
Okay.
How are you, Ziv? Good to see you.
I'm good, I think. Good to see you. I think before the coronavirus situation, I need to take bus to the school in Brighton, and that would cost a lot of time of mine. And now every class just got turned to online class. That saved a lot of time for me, I think. And secondly, I think these quarantine things keep myself in a little room. I think this situation offered me an opportunity to look back on some interpersonal relationship and how to deal with different people or friends. I'm not sure if that helps a lot, but I think it's different.
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing is about the economic situation now happening in the world. I'm not sure, but I do believe there can be some more new chance or challenge waiting for us, and I'm really willing to see a relatively new world based on that.
You know, it's funny you say that. I was just talking to a friend of mine in upstate New York, and she's a bit of a philosopher, and she said, you know, the world seems to be doing better without us. You know, the dolphins in the canals in Venice, and there's no more pollution in Beijing. It's pretty interesting, mostly how quickly the Earth heals itself. It's shocking. But thank you for that. So let's keep on going. So now we're going to talk about the college population and anxiety. And it's a relatively prevalent issue because it's a stressful time. You're going from being a kid to being an adult. You're moving away from home. For Holt students, you're moving to a different country, leaving your support network behind potentially. So we're going to do a quick poll and choose your number of what percentage of college students in the US felt overwhelming anxiety in the past year. So pick your letter number, because when the poll comes up, it's just going to be the letter. So pick your letter that you like. So A for 0 to 20%, all the way up to E, 80 to 100. So let's launch that poll. And just click on your vote. And let's share the results. Okay, so according to our class, which is a relatively small class, everyone's looking at around 50%. So let me do this stop sharing, and it'll give you the correct answer. It's actually 63% of college students felt overwhelming anxiety. So that's 2 out of 3. So most people, on average, 2 out of 3 in every room are going to be feeling overwhelming anxiety. So if you're having an issue with anxiety, you're in the majority. You actually have a lot of stressors going on, but I'm going to share with you today how you can handle some of those stressors. And this isn't just for college students, this is for anyone. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Martin Seligman. He's the father of positive psychology. He will be my professor if I get into Penn, crossing fingers and toes on that one. And this is an interesting study on how happy people are on a scale of 1 to 7. So at the top, this is Forbes magazine's richest Americans. So these are all billionaires. Well, they got a 5.8 out of 7, okay? International college students, 4.9, only 1 point below, which that seems pretty good because they have about $1 billion more than the average college student. However, what if you compared it to Calcutta slum dwellers? That international college students' well-being and happiness is just slightly above that of a Calcutta slum dweller. Raise your hand if you'd like to take a guess at why do you think they're so close? Or why do you think Calcutta slum dwellers are so happy? Why do they score so high? Because that's actually a pretty high score. But feel free to raise a hand. No hands, so let's keep on going. It's actually, oh, Kathleen, go ahead. Give it a shot. What do you think?
Is it because they maybe have less to worry about that's like materialistic things because they're not finding their happiness in that? They're finding their happiness because in other things because that's what they do.
Yeah, it's 2 things, and you got one of them correct, that they really don't have anything to lose, so you don't have to worry about going the 401k, for example. So they don't have a lot to lose, but the other is that they have community. And we'll be seeing in the slides that having community is going to be one of the most important things to help you with your well-being, which is why the social isolation that we're experiencing right now is actually kind of dangerous. And so using alternate forms of community are really important, kind of like Nyland having the 70th birthday party. That's actually important that we do that. It's certainly better than doing nothing or sending a text or an email, which really doesn't get you that connection. So thank you, Kathleen. So according to positive psychology, this is how happiness breaks down. About half of it's genetics. You're either on the happy side of the street or you're not. Then the other 40% is your internal state of mind. How are you taking things that happen? It's kind of like going to the movies. We all see the same movie. Some people said it was great. Some people said it was awful. Someone laughed, someone cried, someone fell asleep. It's all in how you interpret the same information or the same experience. But this is where most humans, Americans especially, focus is the 10%, which is our circumstances. So you can kind of think money on this one. And we'll dig into why circumstances work, that 10%, and when it stops working. So this is the new theory of well-being, and it has gone well beyond happiness. Happiness is kind of like this firecracker of joy. It's effusive, but it doesn't last very long. Really, what we're looking for now is a constellation of 5 things that would constitute well-being, which would include the 5 items you see here in the constellation constituting PERMA. So if you have positive emotions, you get engaged, you have positive relationships, some meaning in your life, and a form of accomplishment, and Uncle Tony's doing crossword puzzles is a form of accomplishment. We're going to dive into how each 5 of these actually operate. So number 1 is pretty straightforward. How do you feel? In a good mood, in a bad mood? This is just joy, happiness, positive feelings. These are just good feelings. Engagement gets into a research by Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, and he coined a phrase called flow. Flow is when you are so engaged in something that you lose track of time. So like I get into flow when I'm doing yoga. I go into flow when I'm painting. So whenever you lose track of time, you're in flow. It's because you're so absorbed in something. The interesting side effect of being in flow is that there are no emotions. You're not happy, you're not sad. You just are. It's actually it's being in the total present moment. So being engaged in something on a daily basis is important. So for me to paint, that's important. For Uncle Tony to do crossword puzzles, that's important. The third one is relationships. So this is loving and being loved. Hopefully it's with the same person. And friends count. This also includes community. So making sure that you are with someone. This could also include a pet. It's why I got a cat, because I know I live alone and it could get lonely. So I preemptively adopted a cat about a month ago, knowing that cat adoptions were probably going to shut down, and they actually did. So next is going to be another guessing game. So feel free to raise your hand on this one. And the question is, what leads to a healthy and happy life? Now, there was a study done by the graduating class at Harvard in 1938. They followed them. They're still following them from 1938, asking them what leads to a healthy and happy life. So what I'd like you to think of is, what do you think the answer is? I will give you a clue that the cohort in 1938 were only men. There are no women in this study. Charles.
Love.
Love. Okay. Let's, I'm going to write these down. So we've got love for one. Thank you, Charles. Gladys, what do you think it is?
I was thinking love too, but
Okay.
having, I guess, family,
Mm-hmm.
like family.
Okay, so love and family. Nyland, what do you think?
Let me unmute. I was thinking 1938, they were coming out of the Great Depression. It was, into, what was going on in Europe, perhaps security.
Security. Okay, great. Thank you. And yeah, you're right. That was a very interesting time. And I'm going to unmute for Aunt Patty and Uncle Tony. Aunt Patty, what do you think? And then Uncle Tony, what do you think?
Well, I think certainly love and family, but also your faith.
Oh, faith. Interesting. Thank you for that. Uncle Tony, how about you?
Well, I think aside from, being able to have self-esteem, I think we have to go, we have to transcend that somewhat. And I very firmly believe in a closeness to our Lord and the teachings of Jesus Christ. And I think that is my salvation. I think that Jesus is my Lord and Savior. I believe that. The Catholic Church teaches that. And I believe very firmly in that. I believe it both stems from and leads to self-esteem. So that's my take on it.
Great, thank you. Ziv, what do you think? What do you think leads to a happy and healthy life for these 1938 graduates?
Yeah, I think first might be security or peace. And personally, I think people may want power to protect themselves, power or money like that.
Okay, peace, power, money. Okay. Thank you. Kathleen, what do you think?
Well, I think I'm going to go with, this kind of goes with the security. The faith thing I think is very important. Faith in something. It doesn't necessarily have to be a religion, but faith or belief system that can get you through good and bad times. That's pretty solid. For me, it is my Catholic faith. And the second thing I think is having and family and love. Those are important, but I think also purpose in life and having something that makes you feel passionate about waking up every day. Those are all things that I would say would be components of a happy life.
Great, thank you. Okay, so drum roll please, here's the answer. It's close relationships, so you pretty much got it. Love and family. You know, close relationships also include faith, so having a close relationship to a higher power, whatever that is to you. So everyone actually got these right. But what is interesting that fascinates me about this study is that it was all men coming from Harvard who were all these overachievers, and I really thought it would have been money. But for men back then, you know, in a more conservative time where sharing your feelings is much more challenging for that cohort, to come out and basically say love, in parentheses, close relationships, I think speaks a lot. So I think by looking at this, it is important that we maintain our close relationships. And for example, this was the first Easter Sunday where I wasn't with my family. And my father said, well, let's try to do something online. And I thought, well, hey, why don't we go to the Vatican and have like Easter with the Pope? And so we Zoomed the Pope, and it was really a lot of fun. And if we had not had coronavirus, we would have never gotten a front row seat at the Vatican. So it was really kind of cool. So yeah, close relationships are really worth putting at the front of the line. Number 4 comes into meaning. And this is where you are belonging to someone or some group, also serving others or serving another group, serving someone, and also doing something that's greater than yourself. And this is where, again, faith is coming in, or you're doing something for community. Number 5 is accomplishment, which is some form of achievement or mastery. You know, this could be something as big as winning the Nobel Prize, which that's fine, but it's also something that's going to be as small as, let's say, the crossword puzzle, or my paint by numbers, or I clip the bonsai tree, or I clean the house. Any kind of accomplishment, even video games. If you feel that sense of accomplishment, that's really important, that we feel that we've had some sense of mastery. Doesn't matter if it's making you money or fame or fortune. It's just where you can say to yourself, I accomplished something. I know my mother, her biggest accomplishment was when cleaning the house and then like mowing the lawn, where the house was actually perfect. And it was very nice. You know, I mean, we did have a lot of pride seeing a really clean house. You couldn't go into all the rooms in our house because she didn't want them messed up. But yeah, there's always a sense of accomplishment. So I'm going to encourage you, for those who know how to do a screenshot or have an iPhone, to take a picture of this. This is the PERMA wheel. And I'm going to show you how we score this. It's basically to see whether or not your life is rolling well. So what we do is, I'm going to show you an example. This is Dr. Bob. So for Dr. Bob, he's going to take a look at engagement for his job. And basically, he's a cancer doctor. He saves lives every day. He's very famous. He's over at MGH. And with engagement, you go to the 0, and the E is engagement. You can go between 0 and 10. And he's a 10, so you cross that line over. This is as good as it gets. Relationships are R, so he's kind of down at a 2 because he doesn't really spend much time with his wife or his children because he's working all the time. So his relationships are at a 2. He doesn't see his friends anymore. Meaning is a 10, so we cross that over because he does have a very meaningful job. Accomplishment, A10, he gets a 10 there. He's highly accomplished. Positive emotions on the P side, he's about a 1 or a 2 because he works pretty much 7 days a week. So this is a highly accomplished, famous cancer surgeon. People admire and respect this person. He makes a lot of money. However, when you lift up the hood of his life, his personal relationships, loving relationships with his friends and families aren't there. He's stressed out, he's burned out and overworked. And if this was a wheel, would the wheel roll? And what I would encourage you to look at is, this doesn't look like a great life. On the outside, it could look amazing. But when you lift up the hood of anyone's life, it can be a lot different. So I encourage you to do this wheel, and this will give you an idea of where are you thriving and where do you need to put some attention. For me, I was raised as a workaholic. So for me to put time and effort into relationships or being in flow, to me was goofing off. And now I've changed that. I realize that I have to see or talk to a good friend every day just for that. So again, you can take a screenshot of this to see where you are. Now we're going to do another guessing game. These are well-being exercises that work. So these are things that I encourage you to do if you're having some challenges with the current environment. What do you think is the #1 exercise that you could do that would increase your well-being? What would be a really quick fix? So raise your hand if something pops in your mind. I'm going to go around to everyone. Let's start with Nylan, and then we'll go to Aunt Patty and Uncle Tony. Nylan, if you could do one thing that would pop your mood into well-being, what's that one thing you think it could be?
Oh, gee. You know, one thing, and I'm not sure this would be the one thing that would pop into my mind, but you know, on a, you know, every morning thinking about what am I grateful for today? Kind of a gratitude list of thinking of those things, regardless of the circumstances. You know, what am I grateful for?
Great, thank you. I do my gratitude list all the time when I'm walking on the street. And I also do a small, medium, large gratitude so that I never run out of things to say. So, I mean, I'll be like, you know, the Dunkin' Donuts hazelnut coffee with the 3 sugars and 5 creams that I'm not supposed to have, but I love. They're perfect. So I'll even be grateful for a good cup of coffee. So yeah, thank you for that. Aunt Patty, what do you think would be the #1 exercise to boost your mood into well-being?
Well, I would say the #1 is a pretty simple one, and that would be taking a nice long walk and enjoying nature and just reminding myself that the glass is not half empty, the glass is full.
Beautiful. You know, according to the scientists at MIT, the glass is always full, 50% water, 50% air.
There you go.
Yeah, so it's always good. Uncle Tony, what about you?
I would say getting out and doing my walk and my jog. I walk. I do about 2.5 miles. Maybe 15 or 20% of it is jogging, which is about all I can do because I've got pains everywhere. You know, I've got arthritis in my knee. I've got arthritis in my back. I've got this. And what it does, it makes me feel sort of like, you know, I'm back in the days when I was playing sports. That's the thing that's always made me the happiest. It's been the kind of the driving issue in my life. The driving force in my life is sports, which I love. I played 3 sports all through high school. I played sports in college. And when I get out and I walk, and I push myself a little bit because I try to push myself, that kind of puts me back in that mode again. So I would say that would be the ultimate kind of both mental as well as physical exercise for me.
Great, thank you. Glidey, how about you? What do you think? What's the #1 thing you could do, according to you?
Well, one of the things that I'm doing right now, so like I'm keeping 3 little promises to myself every day. Like before, like the next day, I keep myself 3 little promises. I promise myself that I'm gonna read 5 pages of one book, that I'm gonna read the news, that I'm gonna walk outside, that I'm gonna call my sister, stuff like that. 3 little promises that keeps me like I have a sense of achievement at the end of the day. And if like I didn't complete all 3, that maybe I complete 1. But you know, it's just like make sure that you keep your mind and your state of being as like in a sense of achievement. So that's some of the things that I do.
Great, thank you. No, that's a new one for me. And so thank you for that. I like to learn too. I encourage you, the reason that we're doing the sharing is that if you hear someone's thoughts or ideas and they resonate with you, try them, take them, borrow them. We're brainstorming and we're sharing best practices with each other. So like, Aunt Patty's writing people a handwritten note. Uncle Tony's doing a crossword puzzle. Me being an art forger and clipping a leaf off a bonsai tree once a week. If it works for you, try it out. So thank you, Glidey. Kathleen, would you like to go next?
For me, I think maintaining, like, being grateful for what you do have, trying to remember that. And I do go on a regular basis to a tree. It's at the Precious Blood Monastery. It's now closed, but it's a very peaceful place. And it's always like a grounding place for me. And that's a place I keep consistent for myself. I go there early morning, sometimes at night, before the end of the day, just to kind of reflect on the day and try to remind myself that this is a temporary situation and that we all face challenges, but this is a different challenge and that all of us are in this together. So, and also reaching out for more people that maybe I haven't heard from, that I know that are the workaholics, or, or that I suspect might be really very upset about this and just haven't said anything, and reach out to them and try to help them. See how they're doing, because there's a couple people that have fallen through the cracks that I haven't been able to get a hold of, working or trying to deal with, thinking of the financial stress. And because there are a lot of people out there that are, they're really in trouble and they don't know what to do, and they're worse off than I am. So I think that's the thing that I try to remember is no matter how bad it gets, there's always someone that's worse than you.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for that. Ziv, how about you? What do you think is the one thing you can do?
Yeah, I think for me, the number one exercise is to practicing my English like that, practicing my English by maybe watching some English movies, see
Yeah.
how they are talking, like that.
Well, actually, Ziv, if you like, Kathleen's actually one of my coaching clients, and I encouraged her to teach English as a second language. Because one of my friends that I worked for in China, he was one of the founders for VIP Kids. And so I introduced Kathy over there, and I think she's going with another company. But if you go into the chat and give her your contact information, maybe you guys can practice a little English together. And she was in Beijing several years ago. So maybe there's a few things to chat about. But yeah, if you want to exchange contact information. And Kathleen, Ziv was in my critical thinking class over at Education First. He's in Brighton. So hopefully
great.
There's a little connection there.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I'm going to take the TEFLEX class.
So here's the number one thing to do: doing a kindness. That's it. Doing something kind for someone else is the most reliable increase in well-being ever tested. So imagine how happy and fulfilled Mother Teresa felt by the works that she was doing. So I encourage you to think about that. That anyone in the world is willing to receive a kindness. So what I'm going to encourage you to think about is, what kindness could you do? So this is homework for all of us, which is going to be due in 48 hours. And I'll give you an opportunity to make a commitment to it. Find one unexpected kind thing to do tomorrow and just do it. And it can be anything. It could be as small as pulling down your mask from 6 feet away and smiling at someone across the street, to opening up a door or doing something more. It doesn't have to be huge, but think about something that you would like to do, that you would be willing to do. So again, we can't go into breakout groups, but it's okay because we have a small class today. But I encourage you to brainstorm and start to think now, what kind of kindness would you like to do that you'd like to report back? And I'm thinking for myself, I have a good friend, Trevor, who he lost his job because of coronavirus. His boss has not given him a W-2, so he can't claim unemployment. So he has no money, and he's trying to start his own business. So the kindness I will give to him is I'll give him free coaching so that he can make an income for himself with a new business, and I won't charge him for that. So that would be my kindness. And Let me start with Nylan. Is there a kindness that maybe you're kind of thinking about perhaps doing for someone that you'd be willing to share?
Sure, and in fact, there is. Um, Tomorrow, I have three sons. One lives nearby me here in Boston, and it's his birthday tomorrow. And I'm going to get up tomorrow morning and I'm making a birthday cake from scratch, which I have never done before. So it's going to be a beautiful, I Googled, it's called the best white cake ever. And it's going to be a white cake with buttercream frosting.
Oh, excellent.
I hope it turns out.
Well, we'll be crossing fingers and toes. If it's a cake or a pancake, doesn't matter. It's the thought that counts. So I'll be rooting for you. Glidey, what about you? Is there a kindness that pops into your mind that you might like to do for somebody?
I haven't thought about it, but right now, but one of the things that I want to do is, since we are all online, there there's UNICEF has like a little program where people are able to go to a volunteer online, and they're able to volunteer like teach kids is Spanish or help kids with their math homework. And I have signed up for them, and I just waiting to receive some their confirmation. That's one of the things that I've been doing. And there's also a website called volunteermatch.com, where they match you with different companies in order to like do volunteer work. It can be either online or on-site. So I'm also waiting for that.
Okay, so volunteermatch.com and UNICEF. Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Glidey.
You're welcome.
Kathleen, what's a kindness that you're thinking of?
Well, I haven't done it yet. I actually thought of this before. I have a good friend of mine. She's going through a challenging time. I have two good friends, but one in particular going through a challenging time. She doesn't know if her business is going to be able to take off again. I think it will, but she loves to bake, and she was having trouble finding flour and some of the ingredients. So I have some of those in new packages. So I was going to put up a bundle and the recipe for the chocolate chip cookies that she likes, and maybe make her some too, and find out where she lives, and go over and bring them to her, and surprise her, like leave it on her doorstep type of thing. I would tell her ahead of time, type of thing.
Great. So you just knock on the door and run away.
Well, yeah, but I have to find out. I think I know she lives on Babusick Lake, but I have to try to make sure I get the right address. So I'll try to get it in conversation, and then I'll like go over and leave it on her doorstep. And, because I know before 10 o'clock, she's usually not out and about. So I could go leave it on her doorstep and then text her later and say, hey, check outside your door, because she lives in a home. So that's what I was thinking of doing, because she's had a really rough time.
Okay, great. Thank you. Aunt Patty, would you like to go next? Is there a kindness that's coming to mind for you?
Yes, I have a dear friend that I went to high school with, and I haven't had a little chit chat with her in probably 6 months or so, and I would like very much to call her. Her husband recently had a stroke and is having many challenges. And one of the things that my friend has been able to do was she found a kind of a home that he can go to, like some kind of a service where they pick him up in the morning and then bring him back in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, that is not available to him, I don't think, during the coronavirus. So I would like to call and see how they're doing, and maybe send them a little special something, maybe something through like a food delivery service, like a little Omaha steak thing or something to make it a little easier for them. And that was one of the things I was thinking of doing.
Great, thank you for that. Uncle Tony, anything coming to mind for you?
Yeah, well, some of the things that I already do sometimes, but maybe should do a little more of. One of the things is to, when I'm out walking, make sure I say hi to the person walking across the street from me, as would be the case right now, and saying, hi, how you doing? and hopefully getting a response from them. Maybe that would be a perk up. Who knows? I don't know about that person, whether he's happy or sad. But if I ask him how he's doing, are you having a good day? That's a good thing. That's a pick me up. And the other thing is, I think about and I do offer a special prayer for the caregivers out there that are giving so much of their time and so much putting their lives really basically on the line for the people who have this coronavirus, and asking that if it's the Lord's will, to let them have a special immunity to the coronavirus because of what they do. And that's basically it.
Great, thank you. Actually, it's funny, in Boston, I've sort of nicknamed it the cold shoulder city, so it's not any warmer and fuzzier with people wearing masks. So I was going to try to get some smiley face stickers and stick them on my mask and see if that would perk people up. But we'll see how it works. Ziv, would you like to share with us what's a kindness that you're thinking of?
Yeah, I'm not sure. And, in China, people are not very used to representing themselves. But I always, it's kind of habit to say thank you and thanks for your effort and good job to the waitress, to the policeman, like to everyone, to say thank you all the time. I'm not sure if that counts.
It does, yeah, it does. Thank you for that. Okay, so what I encourage you to do, if you have a cell phone, just open up your camera and hover over the QR code, and that's going to bring you into our Positive Psychology WhatsApp group. And all we put in here is we don't comment on other people's shares, but this is a way for us to digitally put out into the universe our intention. So if you would like to make a commitment just to the universe that, I would like to do this kindness in the future, feel free to put that into the chat. And what that does is there's about 400 people who are members of that group, and it starts to pepper ideas. So when we put in a kindness of, well, maybe I'll send Omaha steaks to a friend of mine, maybe someone would say, oh, that's a really good idea. I think I'll do that. So this is all about sharing and gathering ideas so we can do some brainstorming and pick up some best practices. So now what I'm going to ask you to do is count on your hand and just hold up into your camera the number of people who you can call at 3 a.m. to tell your troubles to. Just hold up those fingers. So if there's no one, don't put up fingers. If there's one person, you can put up 1 or 2 or 3. Now I'm going to ask you to do with your other hand, how many people are you willing to have call you at 3 a.m.? How many friends do you have where you're like, yeah, you know what, if they called me at 3 a.m. and they're having a tough time, I would totally take their call. Raise your hand with the number of people whose 3 a.m. phone call you're willing to receive. And now I'm going to ask you, how many of these people explicitly know that? So here's your homework. If your friends who you're willing to take that phone call from have not explicitly heard from you that you're their 3 a.m. friend, I'm going to invite you to call, email, or text them. And the reason that this is important is that we actually prevented a suicide the first time that we did this seminar last January on Holt campus. And Charles from Brazil, who was in the room, it was his friend. Charles sent me a letter. He said he had taken my seminar in January where I did this 3 a.m. exercise. He called up his friend and noticed that he wasn't doing well and said that I'm your 3 a.m. friend. Call me if you're having any trouble. His friend did call. And his friend later said, if you hadn't told me that, I was going to commit suicide that night. So this exercise does work in real time. We've actually been able to verify that we've prevented one suicide because of the exercise. So this is actually important. If the people who are very close to you, you're willing to take that call, let them know, because they're not mind readers. And a lot of times people don't want to reach out for help when they really need it. They feel like they're a burden. So make it explicitly clear it's not a burden, it's actually a privilege for you to take that call. Next is some work from John Cacioppo. He's actually documented that loneliness is physically disabling, not just mentally disabling, but it actually has physical consequences, and relationships are fundamental to well-being. So being able to connect with people on Zoom or a phone call or house party, I'll actually put that into the chat. There is an app for people that aren't too technologically savvy. It's called House Party. And on your phone, you can do, basically it's like a Zoom call, but it's really easy to use. So it really is important to start calling those people, because you know what? Everybody's home right now. No more voicemail. This is some data on millennials. 3 in 10 say that they are always or often feel lonely. And the unfortunate thing, people in college right now are not millennials, they're younger. You'll see the trend, the younger the generation, the more lonely they feel. So probably the college students that we have are above 30%. A study of 48,000 college students, look at these statistics. Over 60%, very sad, very lonely, overwhelming anxiety. Over half, hopeless. 19%, only 19% never felt lonely, and 12% had seriously considered suicide. So this is actually something that I would say is really a chronic issue. If you're having that issue, you're not alone, although we feel alone when we're in that situation. So the question is why? And University of Pennsylvania decided to look at it, and they did discover that social media actually increases depression and loneliness. It's a bit of an oxymoron, because on one level you are more connected to people, but you're not connected in the right way. So they dug in deeper. Why is social media use increasing loneliness when you're actually thinking that you're more connected? Here's the reason. Less social media equals less social comparison, which equals less anxiety and depression. And basically, it's the like button. You put something out on social media, if you don't get enough likes, you don't feel good. If someone else got more likes than you, you don't feel good. How many people post bad things about themselves on social media? They always paint the most photoshopped, happy version of themselves, and it's not real. We're also putting up our self-esteem, our ability to love ourselves, into the judgment of strangers. That's simply not healthy. The less social media you have in your life, the less you're going to be comparing yourself to others, and your anxiety and depression will drop. So what I say is connect with people, but connect with people that care about you, not with strangers who stand in judgment of you. And I encourage you to disable the like button if your social media has the ability to do that. Next is a really quick way to get rid of any anxiety and depression disorder that you may feel that you're having. One thing about human beings, and we've taught this in our critical thinking classes here, is that we have a natural catastrophic bent as human beings, which is why we've survived this far. We have a negative bias. We are afraid of or aggressive towards things that we don't know or don't understand because they could be a threat. So we kind of have a negative bias going in. However, for the next 7 days, each night, simply write down 3 things that went well. This is similar to Nyland's gratitude list, but the important part is why. What 3 things went well and why? The reason that why is important is that it's going to start to allow you to identify your strengths. So for example, what went well for me yesterday? I continued to work on my painting. And why did that go well? Well, I'm a perfectionist, and I put on these magnifying glasses with a spotlight, and these impressionist paintings from Monet are super tiny areas to paint in, and my attention to detail is allowing me to make a really nice painting. And that's one of my strengths. I have attention to detail. It's really important that you know what your strengths are, because most people don't. Most people know vaguely what they are, but a lot of times when people point out your top 2 or 3 strengths, you don't even know that they're strengths. You just say, well, that's just kind of me, because they're so ingrained. It's really important to know what went well and why. In 6 months or less, the odds are that your depression will drop and well-being will increase. So this is a really simple intervention. Literally, it takes about a minute to do. It doesn't have to be a formal thing. I encourage you to get into the habit of doing it every day. If not, don't worry about it. Just do it when it comes to mind. So now I'm going to encourage you just to raise your hand and tell us what went well for you in the last 24 hours, big or small, doesn't really matter. I see Alex is in the room. Alex, would you like to share with us what has gone well for you in the last 24 hours?
Let's see. What has gone well for me in the last 24 hours? I have gotten into running, and I have been running a lot. And in the last 24 hours, I realized that my time for running like 3 to 4 miles has drastically increased, or decreased actually. And a lot of that is due to the fact that because I live with good friends and I have a good support system, I've felt like intrinsically motivated to just do those things. But like I realized, I was looking at my times yesterday, and I realized that had changed.
Excellent.
I don't know if that's on topic enough, but that's one thing that's been really good.
That's right on topic. Beautiful. Thank you. Aunt Patty, your mic is still open. What went well for you in the last 24 hours?
I would say my piano playing, actually. There's a song that I've been trying to play. It's called A Memory of Paris by William Gillick. And it's in 3/4 time, which is a bit of a challenge for me. And I seem to be turning the corner a little bit on that. So I was really pleased.
Oh, great. Good for you. I'll buy your first concert ticket. How's that?
Sounds like a great idea to me.
Excellent. Uncle Tony, what's gone well for you in the last 24 hours?
Well, yesterday in the paper, in the sports section, there's indications that baseball is going to be coming back, probably with a format of no fans in the stadium, and with the 30 teams all playing within close proximity of each other out in Arizona, to empty stadiums, which would mean that it would be a basically a basic TV audience. But I'll be very pleased to see the return of sports. I love watching sports. So
Great.
that's been positive. Actually, this morning, the market was up a little bit, so that was a positive thing. I don't know where it's at now. Lord knows it's probably tanking by now. But anyway, I was happy this morning when it was up. So that's another thing that was a good thing that happened.
There you go. Excellent. Thank you. Glidey, what's gone well for you in the last 24 hours?
Well, for me, I have trouble doing public speaking or speaking during a presentation. Right now it's fine because it's like kind of a conversation. But I've been reading on some public speaking books, really small ones. And today I had a presentation and I was preparing for it. And I was going through the books that I've read, and during the presentation, I could notice that I changed the way that I speak, and I was a little bit more confident. So that's one of the things that went well.
Great. The first book that I ever wrote, Glidey, was How to Overcome the Fear of Public Speaking with 15 Techniques That Worked for Me. I'm just uploading it into the chat, so that'll be my gift for you today. How's that? And if you want to do a little cheat, go to the last page. It's the one-page summary of the book. So you don't actually have to read the whole book. Kathleen, what's going well for you in the last 24 hours?
Well, I think that I've been able to like reorganize my home a little bit. And I also just signed up for that program, a couple emails that went back and forth between us on the English teaching, and I just kind of dug in and said, well, I got to find out how to do this. So I just signed up for their program, and it's an 11-week program to get the certifications. So that's something that I'm happy about getting
Great, you can
involved.
practice on Ziv for the next 11 weeks.
I will. I got an email from him with information. I wrote back. So yes, I definitely would be happy to do that.
Okay, so, great. Beautiful. Nyland, how about you? Last 24 hours, what's gone well?
Last 24 hours. Well, let's see, yesterday in both of the HALT classes that I teach, my classes had team presentations, and I was simply delighted with how how original most of them were, and then the ideas that they had. And it's always a pleasure to see when your students kind of apply what they've learned in an original way and come up with ideas that I would have never thought of.
Great, thank
So
you.
it was fun.
Beautiful. Ziv, how about you?
Yeah, I guess in the last 24 hours, I ordered some food, and that suits my taste very much. And I do believe that's a very, how to say that, good thing for me. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. One thing that happened for me on the last 24 hours is I have been fretting with my landlord. She always likes to raise the rent, and I love this place, but I get really annoyed that the rent always goes up. And I was afraid she was going to do it this year. And so it was just a whole stressful thing. And she called me yesterday and she's like, "You're a great tenant. Do you want to renew? We're not going to raise the rent." And I'm like, "Sure." But I spent so much time worrying about it. I thought, okay, why do I continue to do the mind reading thing? I just need to cut that out. So anyhow, yeah, great 24 hours for all of us. So now here's going to be a quiz that you can take for yourself. And this is just going to be on your own. So just grab a piece of paper and a pen. It's the Flourishing Quiz. It's about 9 questions, very short. And what we're going to do is we're going to compare ourselves to the student body back in January of 2020. Also, we're going to be showing you how my human resources students are doing during coronavirus. So it's 2 studies with a time change to see how human thriving is doing. And then you get to do your own quiz. So here's the whole thing, but we're just going to do it one by one. So positive emotion. So taking all things together, how happy would you say you are? A is somewhat happy or better, or B, not too happy or less. If you don't have a piece of paper, you can just follow along. It's pretty straightforward, and we are recording the class. So if you take a look at the left, we had 83 students who were in this class last January, and 74% said that they were happy or better. During coronavirus, with the students, 29 students, this was just a few weeks ago, it's dropped to 65. So we've had a little bit of a dip. It's actually statistically significant. It's about 10%. Next question. I love learning things. Yes is an A, B is a no. And this is testing for engagement and interest. I love learning new things. Yes is A, B is no. So in January, our 83 students come up with 95% love learning new things. Now the cohort is about the same, 96%. So no change there. Next is testing for meaning and purpose. I generally feel that what I do in my life is valuable and worthwhile. Yes is an A, B is a no. I generally feel that what I do in my life is valuable and worthwhile. So last January, we had about 59% of students saying yes. Now, oddly enough, 80% say that their life has a purpose. Not sure why that's such a big jump. This is not a scientific study. Study 1 is 83 people, study 2 is 29. So yeah, that's just sort of interesting. Self-esteem. In general, I feel very positive about myself. Yes is an A, B is a no. I'm also going to put into the chat a great book for anyone that needs some help with self-esteem. It's called The 7 Pillars of Self-Esteem. Oddly enough, the author is a guy who dated Ayn Rand. He had an affair with her. So Ayn Rand is like in the book, which is sort of odd. She was this huge materialist, but this guy is like very emotionally intelligence-based. So it's kind of just an interesting aside on that one. But it's a very good book. So back in January, 57% of our students had good self-esteem, and it's actually higher now, 72%. So again, curious, but it's all in a good direction. Next is optimism. I'm always optimistic about my future. Yes is an A, B is a no. January students, 66% were optimistic, And it's pretty much the same, 65%. Coming near the end here, resilience. When things go wrong in my life, it generally takes me a long time to get back to normal. False is A. True is B. When things go wrong in my life, it generally takes me a long time to get back to normal. False is an A, true is a B. So for resilience, 65% of students had false, meaning that they do bounce back. And that number's dropped to 62%. That's not statistically significant, so basically it's the same. Vitality, I feel strong, active, and have energy. True is A, false is B. Last January, 54% of students had vitality. It's now up to 68%. That is statistically significant. So what's interesting is that things seem to be getting better. Self-determination, I make choices and decisions in my life free from undue external influences or interference. True is A, B is false. For students back in January, 59% felt they had self-determination. It's now higher in the most recent Holt study, up to 72%. So basically, things actually are getting better on a mental health perspective. Positive relationships. There are people in my life who really care about me. True is A, B is false. Survey says Holt students 95% and 96%. So really, really high. So this is actually probably the most important question for the period of time that we're in right now, that we do all seem to have some positive relationships. And it's really important to cultivate them even more right now. So this is how the Flourishing Survey works. For you to be flourishing, according to the University of Pennsylvania, you need all three core features, which were the first three questions: positive emotions, engagement, and purpose. So just kind of being in a good mood, being interested in something where you lose track of time, and feeling that your life has some form of purpose. And then you only need 3 out of the 6 on the right-hand side. So you don't need all of them. You just need 3, whether it be self-esteem, optimism, resilience, vitality, self-determination, or positive relationships. Just grab 3. If you're short on one, what I encourage you to do is find someone who you feel has that strength. So let's say that you don't have positive relationships or you have low self-esteem. Find someone who has lots of great relationships and high self-esteem and say, hey, how do you do it? They will be happy to tell you because you've just flattered them for their expertise. So now we're going to round out the class with some myth busters. So this is a chart which I'm going to expand on. Marriage. A lot of people, especially young people, think, oh, when I get married, I'll be happy. According to the data, women are on the left, men are on the right. The happiest you are is on your wedding day. And then about 5 years into it, women go a little bit below neutral on marriage and happiness. Men, they get a bump into the engagement period, but then again, it kind of dribbles off, and by year 5, they're pretty much neutral. So they're kind of back to where they started, but they're not negative. Women are actually a little bit negative. Men on average are neutral. Divorce, a lot of people delay divorce. They're afraid of it. They think it's going to be bad. However, according to the data, you actually get happier over time. Now, for women, it looks like it takes about 3 years, 2 to 3 years of like a recovery period. Actually, that's 2 years, 2 years recovery period before you start to bounce up. So there's a mourning period and an adjustment. The longer you've been married, the more you have to realize, oh, I'm single and there's a new life and I can start to do things. It can take, 2 years is not unusual to get it back together again. Men, as you'll notice, this is really interesting the way they react. They get less happy before the divorce, and then when the divorce occurs, they get quite a big bump, and it just kind of keeps on going. So basically the data here kind of shows there's really no reason to delay a marriage that's not working for you. Granted, do your thing to work it out, but if it's not going to happen, don't be afraid, because things can actually get better over time. Unemployment, this again is another interesting one. This is long-term unemployment, and this is actually dangerous for the coronavirus. This impacts men worse than women. That long-term unemployment has more of a negative mental health effect on men than it does on women. And this could be the traditional breadwinning culture that some of us are living in, depending on what country we're calling into from today. Widowhood. A lot of people are really afraid to lose their spouse for obvious reasons. The data shows that as your spouse or partner is dying, things do get worse. But right after they die, we bounce back pretty quickly. Perhaps there can be some reframing that they're no longer in pain, they're in heaven, they're in a better place. Humans really underestimate our ability to recover from negative events. So it looks like the worst part of widowhood is before it happens, not after. And then this slide is basically showing satisfaction with life correlated to income. And what you'll notice is that on the bottom red line, that's Hong Kong, over $32,000 a year. They're no happier than people living in Myanmar, India, Bolivia, and Cuba. So pretty interesting that money doesn't have that much of an impact. Oddly enough, if you go to the United States, which is very high on the right, the top right, we're actually less happy than people in Costa Rica and Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. So there's something interesting going on with that data as well. So here's some US statistics for the last half century. Our GDP, gross domestic product, has tripled. Our life satisfaction has not moved at all. Depression has increased 1,000%. Depression is so high that antidepressants are actually in our fish, because people urinate the antidepressants into the toilet. The toilet will then eventually make it to the ocean. Those antidepressants are actually getting into our food supply in the form of fish. That's how many people are taking Prozac. Back to life satisfaction and money, if you look at GDP per capita, basically, if you only have $1, when you double your income to $2 a day, that is going to be a massive increase in happiness, because that could be the difference between eating and not eating, sleeping indoors, not sleeping indoors, having socks, not having socks. But once you get above $20,000 globally, in New York City, that's about $100,000, Boston, about $75,000. Any more money is going to have less of an impact on making you happy. Basically, it's things like, if you're making $75,000 in Boston, you can afford a refrigerator. Now that you're making, let's say, $750,000, you're not going to buy a second or third or fourth or fifth refrigerator. You only need the one. So this is where you're going to get the tail off effort, because your basic needs have been met. So basically, in conclusion, money makes you happier until you have enough. And enough is not a very high bar. It's kind of easy to hit that number. So, you're all in college, you're in business school. The concept that you may make $75,000 a year is not really hitting it out of the park. A lot of us think, oh, I'll be happy when I'm a millionaire. I did that. My life got worse. It got more complicated. So there's really something to be said about simply having enough. For example, I had a weekend house. It was robbed 19 times in one winter. And I thought, gee, if I didn't have it, they couldn't have taken it from me. So there's something to be said about not being too extravagant and flying under the radar. Now, as we close up to finish on time, how do you choose a major? This is one of my favorite indicators. It's called Ikigai. If you do what you love and the world needs it, and you can be paid for it, and you're good at it, you're going to have a reason for being and life satisfaction. So it's really important to get all of these. What you will see in the corners, the text is if you're missing one of the bubbles. So for example, this top right, delight and fullness but no wealth, this means that you are good at what you do, you love it, and the world needs it, but you don't get paid for it. So think of like a nonprofit person who's talking about sustainability. They love it, they don't get paid for it. So yeah, you're delighted with what you do, but there's no wealth. Bottom left is what a lot of Americans have. They get paid for what they do. They're good at it. The world needs it, but they don't love it. And this is where we are comfortable, but a feeling of emptiness. This is also what I call golden handcuffs, where people say, yeah, I got kids in private school and I have a beautiful house with a huge mortgage, and I can't go off and do my passion job because I'm too locked into my expenses. You are young enough to avoid that trap. Ikigai is a great book. There have been several books written about Ikigai. Again, just think about, what do you love? What are you good at? Start there. and then kind of look at what does the world need and could I be paid for it? And again, in Boston dollars, if it's over 75,000, you're going to do pretty well. So again, the good news is this is not a hard bar, but it is hard to avoid the messaging that we constantly get that says, oh, money doesn't mean everything, it won't make you happy, but the messaging says the exact opposite. So we do get conflicting messaging. So I think Ikigai is a great way to choose a new major. And it will not be the beaten path. Make your own path because you have one individual life to lead, and I encourage you to do it to the best of your ability. So thank you for coming to class today. I don't know how I managed to always end on time when I don't have my slides operated like, minute by minute, but we're at 1:28, so we're going to finish up just a few minutes early. Thank you for coming to class today. I'll stay for a few